All right. Hey, everyone. Rebecca Bouldin here, partnerships over at Practice by Numbers. And I am so excited to have with us here in the studio today, Dr. George Hariri with Shared Practices. We recently released our Q3 practice performance report, really just covering KPIs that you should be paying attention to, see how your office is measuring up. And so I invited George, and he so graciously agreed to come on and share some thoughts with us. So, welcome, George.
Yeah, absolutely, Rebecca. Thanks for having me here on the show. And I think that for those who are sort of familiar with me and shared practices, we're crazy about analytics. And so, anytime we have the opportunity to kind of conversate with you guys at Practice by Numbers, I think we have a lot in common and are very like-minded. And so, I'm happy to kind of sit here today and help Dennis understand, how to look at this report, what to do with it, and really how to use data to lead and drive your practice. And I think the thing that I just want to say before we jump in is what data should give you is clarity, and clarity should give you a freer mind. And so that's really what I'm hoping this conversation unlocks for dentists is when they're listening, they're like, okay, I got it. Like, I understand how I can use this data and use Practice by Numbers to better understand my practice and ultimately be more clear. And if you're more clear, then you're more informed, you're much more clear, and you have a more decisive direction. And then that's when you're going to get more results.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said that better myself, George. Why do you think it is, in your experience, just that, doctors, owners don't necessarily put the same value around KPIs, or maybe they misinterpret KPIs? Um, is it a training issue? Is it more about, not connecting the numbers to real outcomes? What do you think?
Well, I think that analytics entered, and I think that it's one of those things that, it's probably been in dentistry for about 10 years now. And I don't really think that we as an industry as a whole have really educated dentists on how to use analytics properly. Because I think it's very common where, and even, it's very simple in an interview like this for you to ask me, what are the top 5 things that somebody would track? And I think that questions like that kind of miss the point, where it's like each practice is unique and each owner dentist has their own unique visions and goals for their office. And what analytics are is they're just objective information about where the practice is at in this given moment in time. And so, I think that when you really think about it, I think what's needed to really accelerate the adoption and people's understanding of how to use the data is to really say, okay, well, how do I use the data to get what I want? Right. And I think that
Yeah.
that's like ultimately what's missing. I think it's, because like, for example, if you're a dentist who has, just too many patients and you're booked out and you're not necessarily have capacity, then you have a whole different set of metrics that are going to be important to you compared to a dentist who has open spaces in their hygiene schedule and is trying to get more patients. And so I really think that um, it's really hard for dentists to understand what data is relevant to me. And I think that is what I would anticipate is one of the big blocks for people to really become heavy adopters, is making it customized to their situation.
Yeah, and I know you and your practices, utilize Practice by Numbers with your coaching clients. Have you found that that customization, is something that I know that's one of the things that drew you to Practice by Numbers, but like,
Yeah.
does your organization use the customization to really tailor that to the specific practice or kind of cohort of offices?
Yeah, so if you wanted to compare Practice by Numbers to other solutions, I think the one thing that Practice by Numbers would stand out clear and far ahead of all the others is the amount of data that is measured. And so that's for us at Shared Practices a huge advantage, because we're going to have one of our coaches meeting with a dentist, and they are going to essentially be understanding those goals that that practice owner has. And then they now say, okay, well, the coach is going to be that person that understands PBN and can dive in deep into all of the different data that is there, and to really help that person make really informed decisions. And so I almost would like to go through a specific example. So I
Yeah,
want to
I love
hear
that.
so we have, like, in the Q3 report, KPI number 2 is active patients seen in the last 18 months. And so I want to use this as an example of a KPI where you can take it, but then what PBN offers is so much more detail. So like for example, what this metric is measuring is it's measuring how many patients have been in your practice one time in the last 18 months. So if you were to say, okay, well, let's just say you have 2,500 active patients, but how active are they? Some people have been
Right.
in your practice 5 times in the last 18 months. Some have been in your practice 1 time, and we're counting them all the same. And so, what practice by numbers can do is you can go into that and you can sort of double click on this type of metric. And then you can say, okay, well, what percentage of my patient base is pre-appointed for their next cleaning? That's going to be an important metric because
Right.
that's going to be telling you how active is my patient base. And then the other one is what percentage of them have been in the last 6 months for their cleaning? What percentage are overdue? Right. So when you look at just the number of active patients, if you are trying to get the highest revenue per patient in your practice, the way that you do that is you have as many of your patients as possible come in for multiple visits. And so it's one of those things that, yes, we can look at the active number of patients, but what PBN also allows us to do is it allows us to look at all the different shades of gray underneath that metric. So, for example, we could say, okay, how well are we doing getting our patients booked ahead? Well, they're going to tell us the percentage of our active patients who have their next booking. They also could say what percentage of our patients are overdue, right? So I think that it's PBN is so unique in the sense that it gives you the ability to, when you know what questions to ask, it has all the answers. And so that's exactly the type of situation where, dentists need to understand their goals. And if their goals are to have, if they have openings in the hygiene schedule, then maybe they could get a lot of their patients who aren't coming in regularly to come in more regularly and fill those holes. And so
Absolutely.
it has so many different ways that you can use the data. And I think that that's what makes it such a great, product.
Yeah, and I was kind of that was next where I was going was like it's one thing to see those numbers or to be able to set a goal and work towards that goal. But if you don't get the team to really understand it and get the buy-in around that goal, um, you're setting a goal without understanding like the metrics at play that go into that end performance goal, right? Um, how how do you, I guess, and your team, how do you guys coach around avoiding being like the number police, right? Like, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to a goals within a practice. Are there particular things that you would recommend, or particular things that shared practices really coaches to?
Yeah. So I think one of our big beliefs is to really start with the why whenever we're talking about anything. And so let's use an example about the hygiene pre appointment percentage that I was just talking about. That metric was what percentage of your total patients are booked ahead for their next cleaning. So we can talk to the team. We could say we want 75% or more of our patients to be booked ahead for their next cleaning. Great. But what we haven't told the team is, why do we want that? And obviously there's business goals reasons. And I don't think those are the best to start with, because your hygienist doesn't care about your goals, right?
Yeah,
So as much as possible, you try to have these shared alignment between yourself, the team member, and the patients. And so a great metric to throw out is you can say that, and when I've checked this was sort of the true metric. It could be a little different today, but what they said is that if a patient doesn't book their next visit in hygiene, there's a 10% chance that they come back on time. And so your hygienists, they were trained in hygiene school to really care, and they are the representative of that patient's oral health,
yeah,
and they really believe in the importance of regular cleanings. And so if you want that hygienist to reappoint at a higher percentage, then what you can let them know is you can say, hygienist, did you know that if a patient leaves without their next appointment, then what's going to happen is 10% of the chance they're going to come back on time. And your hygienist now has a reason that is part of their job. Their purpose of being is to preserve and protect their patient's preventative oral health. And so now we've tied the metric to where their sense of ownership and care is in the position. And that's, I think, a really important step. The other thing that you can do in this same situation is, hygienists, the most successful reappointment rates you're going to get are when the hygienist is making that appointment in the operatory. So once you have that patient come up to the front desk to do that, all of a sudden the patient just wants to leave. So now you're going to have a lower success rate. And so You can explain to the hygienist that, if you don't make the next appointment before they leave, there's a 10% chance they're going to come back on time. And your highest percent chance of making that next appointment is in the operatory. So now we've given them two very compelling reasons why we need them to measure their reappointment rate and do it in the operatory, that we didn't talk about business goals or money or anything. We just talked about their job of taking care of their patients' oral and preventative health.
Yeah, and I think that can be very empowering once they understand the why. Um, those are great examples, George. So, can you? I know how much you coach to numbers, love numbers. Like I've had the opportunity to hear you speak, and it's fantastic. Could you share maybe a success story of a practice that did make meaningful improvements, and it all kind of started around the KPIs?
Um, yeah, I almost would rather not share one. I'd rather share them all.
Oh,
So
good.
something that we do at Shared Practices is really unique is when we onboard any particular client. So anytime a dentist wants to work with us on a coaching relationship, we take a look at their collections over the last 12 months and we average it out and we say that's our baseline. And then we, for 4 years in a row now, have tracked what happens to all of our clients' collections when they've been working with Shared Practices coaching. And so our growth rate year over year has been 37%, 38%, 39%, and then 37%. And so for 4 straight years with over 100 offices each year, we've averaged total collections growth of between 37 and 39%, like very consistently. And,
That's
I
phenomenal.
yeah, so it's almost like, can you share one? It's like we kind of just share them all on average. And I think what has allowed us to, and it's so funny because we have this graph that we look at, and there's different drivers of growth. So sometimes it's increasing the amount of patients that come into the practice every day. Sometimes it's opening up the hygiene schedule. Sometimes it's diagnosing more. Sometimes it's higher case acceptance. Like those are like kind of the four drivers. And every year we the formula for how we get between 37 to 39% collections growth amongst all of our clients' offices, it changes. But every year we have a very similar output, but the inputs change. And I think what that speaks to is it speaks to understanding the practice's bottlenecks and their needs and coaching to those problems. Because when you're doing kind of the same thing for everyone, some people need that thing more than the other.
Yeah.
But when you're just kind of looking at the data and you say, okay, what problems do people have, and then we're going to solve those problems. That's kind of been our formula. And so the data really reflects that as well. And I think it's definitely been like, it's not every single person has had 37% growth year over year. I mean, some people double or more than double, and then other people might get more modest growth. But on average, when you average it all out, we have a pretty consistent track record of staying between 37 and 39% growth year over year. And I really think that that's it's just a matter of listening to the data,
Yeah.
seeing the bottleneck. Like we use this term bottleneck a lot, which is essentially what is the biggest obstruction in this practice preventing it from growing. And so the data shows us where is the growth, and then we just go work on that thing that then unlocks that growth. And so that's where practice by numbers really allows you to have that complete breadth of visibility into all the different parts of the practice. And the reality is that all different parts of the practice are not performing in the same way. Some are really good, and that's where you guys have the percentiles, right? In the Q3 report, you can see the percentiles page. And so naturally, there's going to be areas where you're at the 75th percentile, you're better than 75% of the users. We're probably not going to want to focus our time on taking you to the 90th. We're going to want to find the areas where you're in the 25th percentile, where you're 75% of the PBN users are better than you at a specific thing. And we're going to want to get you to
Bring
the
those up.
50th, 70th percentile. That's where the growth is. And so it's really understanding your data, comparing it to others, and saying, where am I strong? Where am I weak? And there's just a lot more juice to squeeze in your weaknesses than in your strengths.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And bravo, like,
Yeah.
but that's incredible growth. To be able to do that not just 1 year, but consistently, to be able to have measured that. And again, as things change and as the dynamics change with each of the offices that you work with, being able to really tailor that coaching specifically to what their needs are to help them hit that next a milestone or goal that they're working towards. So, well, um, George, it has been absolutely phenomenal. I could talk to you all day. But if somebody wants to reach out to share practices coaching, they are enjoying this message, what you're speaking about is resonating with them, how would they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I want to say before we talk about how to reach out to us is why. So if you like, what we care about is your goals. We want people who have aspirations of things that they really want to do, and then we want to know those. So we really care, and we really like to work with dentists that have a strong sense of vision. This is what I want my office to look like and be like, and then we help them get there. And so if that's something that you're interested in, you can go to sharedpractices.com, and there you can see all of our different services, and then you'll see a tab for coaching. You click on coaching, and then we do what's called a free practice audit, where we actually go through your office. We show you the strengths and weaknesses. We compare that to your goals, and you get a very clear roadmap of, here I am today, these are my goals, and this is how I get to my goals. And then if you choose to work with us to help you along the process, then I think that you'll most likely get there faster, with maybe less of the challenges along the way. But still we'll have plenty of challenges. So, I think that's kind of how to get in touch with us. And then again, I think the thing that we're really passionate about is we're really passionate about people's goals, their visions, and helping those become reality.
Love it. Thank you so much, George. We'll talk again and we'll bring George to you in the future as well. But really appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Happy to be on. Thanks, Rebecca.
Yeah.